This week on Empty Pocket Speed Shop, we're going to drive Merle. Only thing we have left to do is finish the throttle cable, the fuel system, the electrical, the drive shaft, the transmission, the battery. On second thought, maybe we won't drive Merle and I'll just sit in the driver's seat and make engine noises and play with the steering wheel. Nah, we'll see if we can get it going. I'm going to try to drive this thing before the week's over. You guys stay tuned for a new episode, Empty Pocket Speed Shop. Hey y'all, Sean here, Empty Pocket Speed Shop. If you watched last week's video, then you saw that we did get the engine fired up on Merle. I kind of had everything just temporarily rigged up where we could get fuel to it, get spark to it, make the thing run. A long way from being drivable, but that's all we had time to do last week. This week we're going to try to finish up some stuff. We've got to finish getting the transmission hooked up and ready to go, drive line. Put the battery actually on the truck, which will probably still be temporary. Some of the stuff will probably be temporary, but what I do want to get done is get a throttle pedal in there where I can control the throttle. I've got to get a shifter in there where I can put it in gear. We've got to get enough electrical done that I would like to be able to start and stop the engine from inside the truck. A few other little things that we got to get done. So we'll jump right in and I'll show you guys what I'm working with this week. All right, here we are. So one of the things I'm going to do, I don't know if I'm going to use this long term, but I've got this switch panel that does have a starter button and some accessory switches that I can get rigged up for the ignition system, run it inside the truck. For now, I'm just going to take my gauge pod and stick it through this big gaping hole in the firewall. Stick it down in there so I can keep an eye on them. I probably won't even hook up the charging system this week. I'll probably leave the fuel system temporary and just run a couple of wires for my starter instead of using my temporary start button like I had last week. But one of the main things I've got to get done is got to get a shifter hooked up. I've also got to get a throttle pedal hooked up. So you can kind of see what I'm working with in here. The old throttle pedal was a linkage system that doesn't work well with a cable. So I ended up buying an aftermarket pedal. It's just a universal deal. You mount the bracket to the firewall. You can rotate the pedal to whatever angle that you need it to be and then hook a cable into these holes here. I do have my throttle bracket mounted on the carburetor, and I looked around the shop and found an old throttle cable that I think I'm going to be able to make it work. I'll probably have to cut it off, so it may be a little bit too long, but I think I have enough of the pieces of it to make it work. So the goal for this week is to install enough of these parts that we can back Merle out and make a lap around the hayfield. And if we can do that for this week, I'll feel like we've accomplished a lot. So some of the work you're going to see on this week's video, I did last week while I was trying to work on the things just to get the thing fired up and running, because I had it up in the air. So I went ahead and did some of the transmission and shifter and drive line and all that. I didn't put it in last week's video because it wasn't relevant to making the engine run. So this week, I'll include some of that in my video, show you guys the process of what I had to do to get everything hooked up underneath the truck. And we'll also install these parts that I just showed you. And we're gonna see if we can make this thing just run good enough to drive it around the hayfield. There's still a lot of work left to do on this truck, but I do want to get it running and driving under its own power. Show you guys that. And then we're probably going to put Merle aside for just a little bit and work on a different project. I don't want you guys to get burned out on seeing the same thing for those of you that are watching. And I do appreciate it. If you haven't done it already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe, like, share. Help me spread the word about the Empty Pocket Speed Shop YouTube channel. We're going to continue to have a good time working on these old trucks and old cars, and it won't be long. Racing season is going to start. I'll have some videos from the racetrack, so we're just going to try to keep it interesting moving forward, and hopefully the channel will continue to grow. All right, first things first, you can see, told you guys this thing had a little bit of rust in it, and it does. It's not perfect. It looks pretty good from the outside. I'm not too terribly concerned about that right now. At some point, I'm going to have to do inner rockers, a little bit of floor pan work. It does need some floor pan work now. But overall, the bed's really solid, the frame's really solid. The rear differential, I do have it working right now as far as the brakes working and stuff like that, so I'll probably leave it alone. This exhaust system was what was hooked up to the Studebaker engine. I may or may not use it. I'll probably end up putting dual exhaust on this thing. But now you can see I made my transmission cross member just out of a piece of channel iron. I will take some spray paint and paint that black so that it's not painted white. You can see I have a long tail shaft 350 turbo in here, and it has a few little leaks here and there. It was a used transmission that came out of one of my other cars, but I know it to be a functioning transmission, so that's why I went ahead and got that. Here's the factory fuel tank. You can see it's not rotted out. It's got some moisture on it right now, and that's because we've been having storms all day, so there's just a lot of humidity. Everything under here is wet because of the way things have been today. Bottom side, now you can see a little bit better the disc brake setup that's on this thing, straight axle. Everything's original on the springs, all the bushings and everything. Eventually I may have to do something with that. The main thing I'm going to have to worry about when I do get this thing running is tie rod ends. All of them are completely shot. The drag link and the tie rod are shot. But then the other thing that I've got to focus on, you can see, let's see, all right, coming out of the fuel tank, they just go into a little plastic filter right there that's been on there forever. There's that old school single pot master cylinder that is working, or it was last time I hit the brake pedal. At some point I'm going to want to change that out. Got to get everything hooked up on the flywheel torque converter. So let me get the camera set up and get some lights set up, and I'll start working on this thing, and we'll try to get a little bit more done. So, all right, got the starter bolted up, got the starter wire ran up to the top, got the vacuum modulator line on. I'm going to get some hardware, and we're going to try to get this torque converter bolted up. even if it's not a permanent bolting up of the torque converter, I'm gonna get it where we can at least have it hooked up to the engine when we fire it up. All right, so the best thing to have for torque converter bolts is grade 8 fine threaded bolts. I don't have any of those right now either. I do have some grade 8 fasteners. So what I'm going to do, and since this is all just temporary setup where I can make this thing move around a little bit, I'm going to just put it together with my normal coarse thread grade 8 fasteners, and that'll do it for moving it around and things like that. And it'll be another one of those things that I need to upgrade, because I've got some other things like my transmission mount that I've got in here. Although I'm sure it would be fine, I've got it put in with grade 5 fasteners, and I'll probably upgrade it to grade 8. And when I get everything going, I may actually tack weld it on the ends out here after I know I've got everything the way I want it. Probably not, because then it makes it a real pain to remove it if I ever want to pull this transmission out, if it needs to be rebuilt or replaced or whatever. But for now, I'm going to just put these grade 8 fasteners in here. Now, I've got a little bit of gap between my torque converter and my flex plate, and what you really want is you push the torque converter all the way into the transmission as far as it'll go, and you want around a 1/16 of an inch gap so that when you tighten the bolts up, it'll pull it back out. I've got more than that. I've probably got 3/16 to a quarter. So I'm going to take a couple of washers and put in between the flex plate and the torque converter, because what you don't want, if you guys have never looked at the end of a torque converter, and I don't have one down here close to the lift right now, or I would show you, there's 2 notches in the back of the torque converter that engage the front pump on a 350 turbo. And if you pull that torque converter forward too much, it doesn't leave enough of that notch to engage the pump. For a regular daily driver, just cruise your car, you probably don't have to have that much in there anyway. But you want as much engagement as you can, but you don't want it bottomed all the way out to where it's pushing against that pump, because then that also causes a problem. So that's why you want that 1/16 of an inch gap. So what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to slide a couple of washers up in here, or at least I hope I am. And sometimes these things, some of these torque converters, you'll find that they have a all right, that washer fell and hit the ground and took off on me and went to the other side of the shop. So some of these torque converters have a spacer built onto them from the factory, but when you do, I did it again. That's the problem with trying to put 2 washers on something, is it's hard to hold one of them in there while you put the other one in there. But so if you have the correct application, these things are a little bit easier to manipulate up in here. All right. That still may be just a little more gap than what I really want, but I think it'll be fine. Like I said, I will probably get some torque converter bolts and redo this down the road anyway, but this will be plenty good for making this thing drive around the yard. Now, the other thing is, on the back side of the torque converter, you got to make sure that your bolts are not too long, or they'll bottom out against the torque converter housing before they tighten up. I did verify that these, I don't think they're too long. I think if I went to the next size down, they would be too short. And if you've ever done this before, you know there's not a lot of room for your fingers up in here. So that's why I'm struggling with this just a little bit, but I got it started now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to tighten that up yet. I'm just going to get it finger tight. Because what I have to do is roll this thing around to the other torque converter bolts. And if I tighten this one up, then I'm going to have a really hard time getting the washers between the flex plate and the torque converter. So I've just got this one finger tight. I'll roll it around, get the others put in finger tight, and then I'll start tightening them down. And so usually, if I'm working on one of my Monte Carlos or something like that, I have a hole right here that I can put a wrench or a ratchet or something on the crank bolt and spin this thing over by the crank bolt, and makes it a whole lot easier. But if you don't have that and you don't have one of those tools that you put on a flywheel to make a flywheel turn, then you can just get a pry bar and use the flex plate. Make sure you get engaged pretty good. You don't want to chip a tooth off a flex plate trying to spin the engine around. So I'm just going. So I did a little bit earlier when I was off camera. I ran over and I found a different 350 turbo transmission that still had transmission cooler lines on it. And I'm going to try to get them under here. I know they're bent really bad. They're all out of whack. But if I can get them on here and fish them up through the front like they're supposed to be, then that will help me a little bit later down the road when I get ready to hook my transmission cooler up. So that's what we're going to try to do. Is these were on a different transmission. It's already looped together on the end, but they were bent really bad to, instead of hanging out in front of the transmission, they were all folded up so that the transmission could be put in storage. Once I get the fittings connected to the transmission, then I can figure out exactly where I need them to lay. I know this one's getting pretty close. These are not cooperating. Once I get the fittings connected to the transmission, then I can figure out exactly where I need them to lay. These are not cooperating. I know this one's getting pretty close. These are not cooperating. This one's getting pretty close. These are not cooperating. pretty close. Things are not cooperating. This one's getting pretty close. So, stop and breathe for a second. In case some of you wonder why people like me like working on old vehicles, 70-year-old Studebaker trucks or 65-year-old Chevrolets, even on through, hey, look, we can admit it now. People my age can admit that things made in the 80s are really old, and that's when we grew up. I was born in the early 70s. I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and here I am, middle age, working on old cars that are older than me. Some of them are older than me. Sometimes things just don't go well, and the question comes up, why do you do this? Why do you work on cars? Why do you own all this junk? Why do I spend money on stuff that I have to come out here and work and work and work? The answer is, I don't know. I don't know if my generation loves punishment, or somewhere down the line, some of the chemicals that they put in our food caused us to become crazy, or whatever it is. But for some reason, we call this fun. Coming out here and fighting an old rusty vehicle that's 70 years old. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. We really enjoy it. Okay. Pretty close. All right, I know you guys are not going to believe this, but I got one transmission cooler line kinda installed. I think I just did the easy one. So now got to get the other one. Yeah. Stay in this position with your arms up like this is good for your something. I'm sure it's got to be. It's got to be good for your neck or your shoulders or something. It's got to be good because it hurts. And anything that hurts like this, it's got to be good for you. So I always, when I'm having a lot of fun working on old cars, I try to remind myself, you know, the recliner's pretty soft. And I got satellite TV, or I got YouTube. I can just go watch somebody else work on cars, and then I don't have to do this. And you know, Modern cars, you don't have to do all this. They're already put together. They have this thing where you can buy cars that are already assembled and drivable and everything works. Nothing leaks. And you can just get in them. And sometimes you don't even have to turn the key anymore. You can just push a button. And as long as you got that fobbit in your pocket, then it just starts. You just push a button, and then you don't even have to like put gear stuff. You can push a button for the gears too, and you can turn the heat on, you can turn the air on, you can turn your satellite radio on. Everything just works like it's supposed to. And those people are pretty smart. They don't have to do what I'm doing. But I did while I'm complaining about all this stuff. I was able to get that line started. So now, you know, I'm happy again. I'm happy again because now I have my transmission cooler lines bolted up and they're tight almost. It will be just a second. Okay. I'm centered. I'm having fun. I'm getting to work on old cars. I'm living the dream. That's absolutely right. I'm living the dream. I may go ahead, drain the fuel tank and replace this fuel filter, and temporarily I might be able to hook the pump up front and get it to suck fuel up that far. Permanently I want the fuel pump down here closer to the tank, but that thing may, I know they'll pull from the back of the vehicle because I've done it before. So the ones that I use, like I had on the 55 truck, if you watch that episode, they're pretty good pumps. I know they'll pull fuel from the back of the vehicle, so I may go ahead and do that. I may drain this down and put a new fuel filter right here, because I've got another one of these little plastic fuel filters, and put some fresh fuel in this tank and let it feed off of this instead of trying to hook up that 3-gallon cell from the other truck. And then that would also keep me from having to go out there and rob everything off of that other truck just in case I need to move it around again. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and replace this fuel filter. I think I have the right filter to just swap that out. But before I do that, I probably need to go ahead and drain that. I'm almost positive I don't have more than 5 gallons of fuel in that. And so I'm going to just use my oil drain, and then I can dump it back out. Because this gas is not good anyway. I just emptied this the other day, so I know I can get 5 gallons, and when I drained it before and put fuel in it, I'm sure I wouldn't have put more than 5 gallons in it. So I should be able to drain it all into this. Maybe. And this is out. All this stuff looks like it's factory, and I'm going to tell you, whoever decided to put a drain plug in the bottom of the fuel tank, I wish every other fuel tank manufacturer would have learned a lesson from whoever did this. You know, this gas really doesn't smell all that bad. It's a little old. I'm going to go ahead and drain it out. And in all actuality, it would probably burn. Yeah, it's probably would have been okay. But since I'm draining it out, it'll make it where I can do this fuel filter real quick and not have to worry about it. So let me grab some pliers and work on that. This, one of the reasons why I want to go ahead and change this fuel filter right now, even though we're just going to be temporarily trying to get this thing to run, is it looks terrible. It looks like it's black inside the filter. I don't know if that's the way the filter was made or if it's got that much stuff in it, but either way, let me check my jug here. I want to make sure I don't run my drain pan over and dump fuel all in the floor. All right, we're good so far. Now, maybe a little flaw in the setup that the guy's got here. There's no play in this at all. To be able to move. All right. Okay. If you ever want to clean your eyeballs out, just splatter a little gasoline in them, and it works really good. All right, now I'm making a mess. For a while, I may end up just having the pump in the front, and if the pump will live, then set it up where the filter and the pump are both up there. Then I can just put a junction hose down here. I think I'm going to do that. You know, I may go ahead while I've got this apart and just put a piece of junction hose in this and not worry about putting a filter down here. Okay. What I've got to do is go over here and get a short piece of rubber line. I'm just going to put this back together where my fuel filter was at. And then I've already got my plug back in my fuel tank. Button that up, and then I think I'm going to measure real quick and see if I've got a drive shaft that'll go in here before we let this thing back down off the lift. Because if I do, if I can get a drive shaft in here and then figure out how I'm going to put this thing in reverse and drive, we might be in business once we get it running. So what I may have to do, you know, there's a hole right here where there's supposed to be a panel on the inside that covers the hole up, and it's for putting brake fluid in the master cylinder. I might have to temporarily hook one of my shifter cables up, like for my B&M shifter, and just stick the cable through this hole. And then even if I just zip tie that shifter in there somehow, just to make it where something is allowing me to put it in reverse and back in park, drive like that. And then I'll worry about a permanent solution later, because they do make, like I said, there's a low-car shifter, and there's other brands too. Low-car is the expensive one, so I'll probably never have one of those. but they make one that bolts on to, you get a bracket that bolts on to these 350 turbo housings. Now the beauty of this Studebaker is this panel right here above the transmission is removable. So when I do get ready to do something with this, I can just take these screws out. I can just take these 70-year-old screws out. It'll be no problem at all. Take those screws out and get my shifter set up and figure out where the hole needs to be, cut the hole in this panel, put it all back together, and it'll make a really neat application without having to butcher my floor pan. I can just I actually think I have another one of these panels anyway, but I can do that. But for now, I just need to get something going. So let me grab a piece of fuel line. I'm going to tie this back together, and then we'll see what we can do about a drive shaft and a shifter. All right, got me a piece of fuel line. All right, so we're good. Got that. Now, I got to measure a couple things. I've also got to try to see if I can find the straps that go on the rear end to hold the U-joint in, and I'm going to see if I can find a drive line. Okay, so I went and looked around, and I think I may have something that I can make work for a drive shaft. I did find my U-bolts that holds the drive shaft in this rear end here, so just trying to clean out where the caps sit. If I got lucky and found the correct length drive shaft that has the correct U-joint in the back of it, then you know that's going to be pretty incredible to be able to have that happen. Try not to shine this light in your eyes while I'm videoing here, but I do have to have it where I can see. It's going to be pretty incredible if I have a drive shaft that actually works in this thing, because nothing was planned out for this. I just decided I'm going to put this engine and this transmission in this truck, and then I'll worry about a drive shaft later. Well, it turns out that I had this drive shaft in my 56 Chevy. You guys haven't seen that car yet. And when I pulled the engine and transmission out of it, I just taped it up and stuck it over in a corner. But it had new universal joints in it, or I say new, they were several years old, but they probably only had 1,000 miles on them the whole time I had it in there. And it was set up for a 350 turbo output shaft. So I'm going to grab it real quick and just stab it in here and see. Just throwing a tape measure on it, looked like it'd be pretty close. So I'm going to just stab it in here and see if it lines up right. Going to be close. It may be just a hair too long, but put the transmission in neutral so I can spin it around. Man, so close. Oh, wait a minute. I've still got some. You know what? I think what it is, so I've got an extra long yoke on this transmission, and I think it's bottoming out. But the beauty of that is, it is one of those that you can cut off. got this thing cut off. I'm hoping that it fits now. Okay. Oh me. Yeah, you guys. I'm sorry for the light shining in your eyes, but I got to check and make sure the engagement on this U-joint is dead on. Wow. All right, guys. The Lord is shining down on me today. Everything that happens the hard way, every now and then, it's a little better. So I think the only problem now is I've got to make sure that I cut enough off of the front, because when the suspension travels up and down, this slip yoke that's in the back of the transmission goes in and out. And you can see the angle of the drive line, so when the rear end goes up, it shortens the distance between this yoke and the back of the transmission, and it pushes the transmission in, the drive shaft into the back of the transmission. So the main thing I got to do right now is make sure that I've got enough room for it to slide forward, and then, so I know it works now. I'm going to see, before I bolt this in, I'm going to see how much engagement I've got and see how much room I've got for it to move forward. So right now there is 1 3/16 hanging out of the back. Oh yeah, I think I got plenty. It's usually recommended that you have at least 1 inch. Well, so I've only got almost. Let's see if I can. So that's 5/8. I don't quite have 1 inch for it to move forward. So let me see how much engagement I've got. I've still got 3 inches up inside the transmission, and the way these are made, the tail shaft sticks out about 1/2 inch. So I've got about 3.5 inches of engagement, but I only have a little over 1/2 inch that it can go in. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, and since now that I have found out that this thing is going to work, I'm not going to have to pull it back out and look for something else. I think what I want to do is go ahead and cut another 1/2 inch off of this drive shaft. That way I've got a full inch that it can go in, and then I'll still have plenty of engagement on the tail shaft of the transmission. Okay, so where I'm at right now with this thing is under here, we've got the starter and the starter wire, we've got transmission cooler lines, I've got the vacuum line hooked up to the modulator, I've got the drive shaft put in. Everything's kind of hooked up. I drained the fuel tank, I've got the fuel line reconnected. So when we let this thing back down, everything's going to be up top. So the only thing left to do is really a shifter. So I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go upstairs in the loft and find one of my B&M ratchet style shifters, or just a B&M performance shifter or whatever. One that's complete, that has all of the cables and brackets and everything with it. And we'll go ahead and install that. If I can find all the correct pieces, we'll install that on the transmission, run the cable inside the cab, and then we'll figure out, even if I just run some sheet metal screws in it to hold it down temporarily, that way we can have a shifter when we get this thing running. We get it fired up. If everything's working right and nothing's leaking, we'll be able to back this thing out of the shop and go for a lap. And that would be phenomenal. I definitely wouldn't want to go far on these back tires. They are about to blow out just sitting here on the lift. They're so dry rotted. All right, so what I did, had to go get a ladder. Since I have to turn my generator on to let my lift up and down, just grabbed a ladder so I can climb up in there, cut that carpet back around this hole that's in the floor pan. And this is 100% not how this thing needs to be. Once again, I'm just trying to get it where I can move it around. But I got the shifter ran down through this hole. I've got the cable looped back around so that I can get it back over here, kind of where it was at before. So now I can get it actually hooked up and then tighten up the connectors. And, it should allow me from inside the cab to be able to find the gears. And it's definitely wouldn't be how you would want to put it together for even normal driving, just running around. But all right, that cotter pin and washer just barely fits in there, which is good, because now I can curl this up to where it can't come back out until I'm ready to take it back apart. And this will be in there. All right, so that can't go anywhere. So what I've got to do now is get this adjusted. All right. Now, what that should do, if it'll still work after I loop the cable around, then that should have it where I can at least fiddle around with that shifter and find the gears once I get inside the truck and we get this thing running. Let me look over everything here before we let the lift back down, because that's where I'm at. I think I'm ready to drop this thing down off the lift. So if you're hearing the rain on the video, I apologize for that. This week here in Tennessee, they were calling for the rain to start this afternoon, and it's supposed to rain for about 3 days straight. So you may hear the rain on the video some. If you do, I apologize. There's not much I can do about that. I've got a pole barn with a metal roof and metal sides, so if it starts raining really hard, the noise from the rain comes through. I'll try to speak loud enough that my voice comes through on the videos. Alright, I didn't want to bore you guys with a bunch of tedious measuring and cutting and things like that, so I just cut straight to the end on this throttle cable deal. You can see I cut everything to fit right here on my throttle bracket. This bracket is specifically made for Holley carburetors. Already had the springs and this little bracket on it, so I've got it hooked up. Show you guys, here's what it looks like at the firewall. Spinning around, got it bolted together there. Now, excuse all the junk in the floor. There's my throttle pedal. And then here we go. Stick my foot in here. You can see now I'm able to work the throttle from inside the truck. All right, everybody. Come out here a little bit earlier. Didn't have my camera on, but in order to keep this video from being too terribly long and just showing you guys a bunch of tedious stuff that I did, I temporarily, and I mean very temporarily, if you can see down in there, I screwed a battery box to a piece of 4x4, and I have that zip tied to the grill to get my battery up inside the grill area. I've still got my ignition and fuel pump running off alligator clips for now. I have run out of time for this week to be able to finish up some of this stuff, but the goal for this week was to make this thing move under its own power. You guys already saw the throttle cable. I did stick the gauges inside the truck and zip tied them to the dash. So I have them there where I can keep an eye on everything. I have my shifter laying here in the floor, just laying loose. I can stick my foot on the back of it and work the shifter back and forth to move the shift selector on the transmission. The brakes appear to be working a little bit. So I am about to the point that I'm ready to try to put this thing in gear and back it out of the shop under its own power. I have checked a couple of fluids. I threw a little air cleaner on there. You guys will see as you continue to watch my videos. I'm not a big fan of driving vehicles around with no air cleaner on That's just one of my things. So I just threw that one on there to keep it from sucking some trash down the carburetor, causing me more problems than I don't want to deal with right now. Middle Tennessee has had several inches of rain. So I don't know if it's safe for me to try to go around the hayfield because I may end up getting stuck. I'll pull over there and see, and if it's where I can, I'll do a quick drive around the hayfield and just try to stay out of the muddy areas. But there's a lot of standing water. Today it's not raining, but it has rained for 3 out of the last 4 days, and they're calling for some more rain this weekend. Some areas of Tennessee are under flood warnings and flood watches and stuff like that. I live in a high area. I don't have to worry about my property flooding, but it still does. If we get as much rain as we've had over the last few days, it holds water. The ground gets really soft. The tires on the back of this truck are almost non-existent. So I don't want to take a chance on getting the truck stuck out in the mud. But I'm going to move the camera around just a little bit. I'm going to fire this thing up and see if I can back it out of the shop under its own power. For the first time since the first week that I brought the truck home, I think it's been 3.5 years. I backed it off the trailer. My wife and I made a little lap around the field, started disassembling it. Some of the pictures that I've got on, like my thumbnail from last week's video, that's the truck with the front axle and everything out from under it when it's sitting over in my other garage. But yeah, so we're here. I'm ready to. The seat is not bolted down. The shifter's not bolted down. Everything's temporary under the hood. But I'm going to see if this thing will move, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, moment of truth. I'm going to take the wheel shocks out from behind the tire on this thing, and I'm going to fire it up and jump in it and see if it'll back out of the shop. So hopefully I'll be back in just a minute. All right, I did it. I backed it out of the shop. So let's grab the camera. We'll go out here and see, do a walk around while it's running, check on a couple of things, and then, hey, we'll drive this thing at least down the driveway or something. All right, I did have to sitting here idling. I was trying to get some stuff situated where I could go try to drive around, and temperature started climbing up pretty good. So I ran in there and grabbed an electric fan that I had that I was probably going to use on this anyway. Jumper wired it like I did everything else. Everything is jumper wired. Just got it sitting in there blowing some air across the radiator. Seems like it's running cool enough now, so I was afraid it had already climbed up past 230. I don't want to blow a head gasket the first time I drive it around the field. So I'm going to try to get this thing moving a little bit, and we'll see if we can make a little lap real quick. Here we go. You guys see the old 55 in the background there. I'll cut away and we'll jump out to the hayfield. Just about got stuck back there, so this was probably a bad idea. So as you can see, kind of stuck. So hopefully I can get it over here where it gets some traction again. Well, that was quite an adventure out there in the field. I was pretty afraid I might get stuck because of all the rain, and I kind of did. I have that one really slick tire, and of course, as soon as I got in the wet soup over there, it started spinning. So luckily out in the middle of a field, I was able to just leave it in drive, get out and push the truck with it in gear, and got it out of the mud. I did kind of make a little bit of a mess. The truck wasn't clean anyway, it was pretty dirty, but now I've got it back over here. I've stuck it in the garage, And now we're gonna move on to a different project. So that's all I've got for this week. I appreciate you guys watching this episode of Empty Pocket Speed Shop. Make sure and tell your friends about it. Make sure and tune in next week and we'll see what kind of project we can get into. Pay attention in the middle of the week. I'll put out a teaser video. It'll just be a YouTube short, a couple of minutes to introduce what I'm going to be releasing for next Friday. I don't know what that's going to be yet. Thanks for watching.